Let me get your analysis on the economic situation that we're facing right here, right now in America today.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different aspects that I could approach dealing with that question on. But I'll just say this. I think that all of the talk that we're hearing about tax cuts and the political wranglings that we're seeing in Washington, D.C., over the direction that this country is going in economically, really pales in comparison to the big picture. This is no longer about a new round of economic growth, as we saw with Ronald Reagan coming into the White House talking about morning in America. This is about the very solvency of the United States of America. In the last 3 years, actually since September of 2008, the Federal Reserve has added over $3 trillion to our money supply. This is a serious threat to our bond markets and our ability to be able to continue to finance our spending in this country through borrowing money. Already we're seeing consolidation of monetary policy, du jour, so to speak, between the Russians and the Chinese in response to a weak dollar here in the United States. We're seeing emerging problems in the European Union once again, with Ireland's sovereign debt becoming a serious issue around the world. And the solutions that central banks are coming up with almost universally around this axis of deficit nations, as I like to describe them. In other words, countries in the European Union that are running these huge deficits along with the United States, the solutions that they continue to come up with is to print more money. History has shown unequivocally that every society that has ever experimented with perpetually expanding fiat money has always ended up in ruin. So I think that's the big picture. People need to know that this is beyond the jurisdiction of anybody's White House. We can continue to play these political partisanship games, the left wanting to blame the right and the right wanting to blame the left, when in reality, the problems facing our economy today are not caused by politicians, but by monetary scientists. We have to understand that it has been 30 years of a policy of deindustrializing the United States, 30 years of outsourcing our jobs and offshoring our industry that has brought us to this tipping point wherein our very solvency is now at issue. I never would dream in a million years that I would be bearish on our bond markets to the degree that I am today. But I'm the most bearish on bonds of any other asset class, precisely because we way too much money.
Let's go over that report. China and Russia quit dollar. China and Russia have decided to renounce the U.S. dollar and resort to using their own currencies for bilateral trade. Premier Wen Jiabao and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, announced late on Tuesday. Chinese experts said the move reflected closer relations between Beijing and Moscow. Putin said one of the pacts between the two countries is about the purchase of 2 nuclear reactors from Russia by China's one of their largest nuclear power plant, the most advanced nuclear power plant complex in China. Andre, where do you think this is going from here on out? Or another way to ask that question, how long do you think things are going to be somewhat stable within the United States the way that things are going right now with our domestic monetary policy?
Well, I think that it is deteriorating. And really what you're talking about is the hegemony of the U.S. dollar and the dollar status as a world reserve currency, as well as America's ability to continue to be able to finance its obligations in this country, everything from the wars that we've been involved in now for almost 10 years in the Middle East, all the way down to Social Security payments. We've been borrowing this money. QE2 was nothing but a stealth mechanism to print money by the Federal Reserve. For them to come out and let me add this, it wasn't $600 billion, it was actually $900 billion that the Fed added into circulation. It was $600 billion in treasury purchases in $100,000 per month increments, along with an additional $300 billion in asset purchases by the Fed from profits from previous proceeds. So that brings their total to $9 billion. And everybody around the world is fully aware of history's lessons as it relates to printing money like this to run a government. It's an unsustainable model. You know, there's only three ways the government can raise revenue. Either we tax it, borrow it, or we print it. I think that this country has been taxed to the point to wherein we cannot be taxed anymore. I think perhaps maybe on the very wealthiest segment of our society, they probably could be taxed a little bit more. And I don't want to hear this crap about, well, you know, they create jobs. They haven't created any jobs in 30 years. They've taken their wealth and moved our jobs overseas, so I'm not falling for that okie doke anymore. No offense to any of my friends from South Georgia, but I'm not falling for that one anymore. You know, we want a serious commitment towards nationalism in this country by America's corporations, or we're not going to bail you out anymore. And that's, I think, the point that the country has reached right now. I think that people have had enough of these bailouts. We saw $700 billion as Bush was going out of the back door through TARP. We saw another $787 billion by the Obama administration. $1 trillion that was set up in the TALF program that nobody talks about, a speculative pool of liquidity for billionaire investors and speculators to come and borrow the money. They only had to put up 5%, so they had no skin in the game. The Treasury Department guaranteed the other 95% of $1 trillion pool of liquidity to speculate on the same toxic assets that bankrupted our capital market system in the first place. So there's another $1 trillion, and then now you add QE2's $900 billion. By my math, that's about $3 trillion plus. Since September 2008. It's unsustainable. I mean, I'm extremely alarmed by this because the very survival of the United States is at risk. We have reached the tipping point. If Europe can have defaults on their sovereign debt, then the same thing can happen here in the United States. And there are so many different strategic implications of this as well. I mean, problems that we want to, I know you wanted to talk about the situation in Somalia, but it's going to be very difficult to address the brewing conflagration anywhere around the world, particularly as it relates to stateless terrorism, when we are so deeply mired in debt. We've lost our ability to be able to advance our foreign power, and contrary to what Bob Kagan and some of the other thinkers have said, I do not believe that we can advance our foreign policy at the barrel of a gun. I think it's reckless, it's provocative, it's dangerous, and it could lead to an unthinkable war at some point in the future. So we must restore America's economic prowess in order to be able to advance our foreign policy through diplomatic means, or else this world is going to become a hell of a lot more authoritarian and a hell of a lot more dangerous. And I don't think we should leave our children a world like that. We're smarter than that. The American people, unfortunately, have been miseducated. We unfortunately are fighting such a horrible fight in being so partisan and so politically driven that we're blinded from what's really, really taking our economy down, which is bad monetary policy and bad trade policy.
Right. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Because we live in a country where the MIAC report was produced in the state of Missouri, and there are other versions of this, where Ron Paul supporters, people that might have a America Freedom to Fascism bumper sticker, might potentially be flagged by a law enforcement officer suspecting the driver of the car of maybe being a terrorist of some type. So we're seeing this propaganda being put out there to influence those in law enforcement to view people that are opposing the monetary policy of the Fed as potential terrorists. And then you have MSNBC and Keith Olbermann comparing people that question the direction Obama and Bush, really, how they have taken the country, but really bringing it back down to a very childish, weak argument, suggesting that the American people, those opposed to this, might be racist if they don't like these particular policies. How do you react to some of this nonsense when you hear it yourself?
Well, listen, racism is something that we're always going to have with us here in the United States. It's because man was made subject to the invisible principle of vanity. That he thinks he's better than somebody else. Having said that, the way empires are established, and this is the way I tell people that say, well, you know, particularly my fellow African Americans, some of whom, you know, the dilemma of patriotism towards a country that enslaved their ancestors and that structurally disenfranchised and discriminated against them, and when the late 1960s, their reaction to it is to consider themselves not citizens of this country. I say, listen, no, that is the wrong attitude. Our ancestors paid the price for our citizenship, and we love this country during a time when America didn't love us. Now, we have to be full participants in the political discourse, and we have to have our say. We should not be intimidated by anyone to not have our say. Neither should we use the race card like it's, in a willy-nilly fashion. Number one, it doesn't make strategic good sense for black folk to do that because you dilute the power of it. If every 5 seconds you're hollering somebody's a racist. Now, are there racists out there who don't like the president because he's black? Of course. But I do think that those people who are led by that kind of logic really are persona non grata. They are not going to be a significant component in trying to correct this country because they're not interested in correcting the country. The vast majority of Americans who want to debate ideas, those are the ones who will determine the future direction of this country. And I'm so glad that you lumped President Obama in with the same category as President Bush because, both of them have not done anything to stem the tide of jobs going overseas. Both of them have decided that deficit spending is going to be the prescription for running our economy, and it's never going to work. And then you'll get those on the left who will logically say, well, what other alternatives do we have? As if to say we don't have any alternatives except, to continue deficit spending. And we do have alternatives. The same kind of austerity that I'm expected to live under, I can't, spend more money than what I earn because, I'll go bankrupt, I'll lose my home and everything else. That's the same kind of austerity that our corporations and banks must have. I think it was atrocious for Geithner when he was running the Fed in New York and as Treasury Secretary to continue to not insist that these banks take a haircut on their losses. Now, he'll have one more chance to redeem himself. I guarantee you it's coming because we do have another crisis brewing in our banking system, and they're going to need another bailout. Bank of America is in serious trouble right now. They're going to need another bailout. And if you dare, either by stealth or by direct requisition from the American people, help these bankers without them taking a haircut, without them, accepting less than 100 cents on the dollar for junk assets, basically. I think the American people have every right in this world to be highly upset and to take it out on the politicians who sit in power.
You mentioned Ireland earlier, thousands protest against Irish bailout. Andre, I'm wondering at what point are we going to see people, especially outside the box of the Tea Party, protesting the Federal Reserve's policies? But it reads here that more than 100,000 people gathered recently in Dublin to demonstrate against four-year austerity plans to reduce debts. And these people are protesting in overnight snowstorms and freezing temperatures. I mean, we don't even have the weather. The weather's been weird and cold lately, but I don't see an excuse why the people of Portland aren't also protesting en masse.
Well, it's very painful when you have to lie in the bed that you made for yourself, and we all understand that pain. Corporate America and big banks have never been forced to take that kind of pain. Now, albeit if we do, start forcing a significant number of institutions in our capital markets to deal with their own problems, to eat the fruit of their own fiscal irresponsibility, it could reach a tipping point to wherein the crisis will be felt on Main Street. But make no mistake about it, the banking crisis was a crisis that primarily, not exclusively, but primarily was a crisis on Wall Street. It was a crisis for the Fed. It was a crisis for the Treasury Department. It was not a crisis for Main Street. And not to the degree that it was played up to be in the media. So nobody likes to have to take the tough medicine and lie in the bed that they made for themselves. Nonetheless, at some point, we will, in this country, will have to deal with our problems in a more responsible way and not simply opt to print money, not simply opt to squander our foreign policy leverage by living on borrowed money from a nation in the Eastern Hemisphere that I was told my whole life was an enemy of America, that they were antithetical politically to the United States, and they still are. I mean, China is a communist government with a hybrid socialist capitalist economic system, much like ours. You know, we have a hybrid socialist capitalist economic system. You know, and for anybody to say that, you know, oh no, we're all purely capitalist, you're insane. I mean, what do you call Social Security? They take Social Security out of your check and they spend it in benefits for other Americans. That's socializing the Social Security for everybody else in this country. When we build roads, I mean, that's a form of the socialization of the maintenance of our infrastructure. So we have a hybrid socialist capitalist system, always have, and we always will in this country. That's the reality, boys and girls. But we nonetheless are going to have to begin to take the tough medicine. Now, what we need to do is to demand that these corporations, and probably the only way we're going to be able to do it is through being consumer activists, we're going to have to demand that they not run these companies, these banking institutions primarily, that are systemically critical to the whole U.S. economy. We have to demand that they not run those companies in the ground, or if you do, we should send you to federal prison. You know, we're going to have to enforce the securities laws that are already on the book. We got to give, you know, big-time teeth to the Security and Exchange Commission, which is one of the things that I was a little disappointed with in the Economic Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It did not give the Security and Exchange Commission the sweeping latitude that they need to rein in malfeasance on Wall Street. Until we do that, and until we wake up and stop subsidizing the malfeasance and the risk and the avarice of the wealthy in this country, everybody who works for a living is going to continue to get hosed.
Andre, I want to thank you for coming on tonight, even though we don't have a lot of time. How would you like to lead this conversation, in particular advice? There are many people watching this show that are very concerned. They're interested in preparedness. They're interested in looking into diversifying their portfolio, if they're fortunate to even have any assets whatsoever. But Max Kaiser recently called on the people of not only in America but the world to, at least if everybody bought one silver coin, it could take down J.P. Morgan. And so there's many different suggestions, potential solutions for averting a crisis individually, personally, by having the foresight, the awareness, and the knowledge to see the approaching storm. In fact, the storm that's already here. So in leaving us tonight, how would you advise viewers, anyone listening right now, how they face these times that are coming?
Get a hold of a good newsletter, and I have a recommendation. A friend of mine, Joseph Meyer, and I want you to have him on your show at some point, Alex. He's an arbitrator mediator with New York Stock Exchange and FINRA. He's been a Wall Street professional for the last 45 years. He has a great newsletter. It's called straightmoneyanalysis.com, straightmoneyanalysis.com. And you're not going to get that kind of information anywhere else. It's considered largely proprietary information that's used to cultivate strategies for wealth building for the elite in this country. And you're going to get that same kind of information in very digestible form. Just go to Straight Money Analysis. You can also go to my website, realdealtalk.com, because I don't play these partisan games. You know, I'm truly an independent. I'm nor to the left nor to the right. I'm on the American people's side, period. You know, and I'm not anti-business, but I do believe that businesses in this country are going to have to, you know, practice a little bit more fiscal responsibility and not put us into so much trouble to wherein, you know, you've jeopardized the entire economy and the prosperity for every other living American in this country. Finally, I'll leave you with this. Silver. I'm very bullish on silver. I told George Norrie this the other night on Coast to Coast. For the last 873 years, prior to 2008, we saw silver trade at an average of anywhere between 1 and 16 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. I'll repeat. For the last 873 years before 2008, it took up to 16 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. After 2008, we saw that ratio widen significantly. It went all the way up to $60 an ounce to buy 1 ounce of gold. Today it hovers right around $48 an ounce to buy 1 ounce of gold. So we can see a huge anomaly here in the historic ratio of silver to gold prices. This means that there is a tremendous upside to silver while it corrects to its historical average to gold. So I'm very, very bullish on silver. I think it's the poor man's gold. You can get a 1 ounce silver coin right now for about $30. I'd buy them and put them away because you're going to need it. Paper money is going to be worth nothing. History tells me that every time any society has experimented with printing the kind of money that we've seen in the last 2 years, that society is on the high road to ruin.